Hi guys, hope you all doing well. Welcome back to our channel, and in this video I'm going to discuss about the process which needs to be followed in terms of onboarding servers to Azure with Azure ARC. Now, if you're watching the series from the beginning, in the last video we have discussed about what is Azure ARC for servers, whereas the core agenda of this video will be knowing how to onboard servers to Azure using Azure ARC. What are the different types of onboarding processes which are available? What are the roles required to onboard servers to Azure using Azure ARC? Then we'll talk about the details of the script which is used to onboard servers. And lastly, I'll show you how you can onboard a 2019 server. The process is fairly simple for all the platforms, but I'll show you on 2019 and I'll show you how that particular server gets onboarded to Azure. Now, if you have not seen the last two videos, it will be better if you can see them, because then anything that I'm going to explain in this particular video will make a lot more sense. Okay, so the prerequisite for this particular video is that you should know what is Azure ARC and what is the purpose behind using Azure ARC for servers. Now, since the onboarding of server to Azure using Azure ARC just requires an agent to be installed, this is the link where you can go and get the agent directly downloaded. And I'll show you that where exactly this particular link is mentioned in the onboarding script. Okay, so now let's assume that you want to onboard a AWS server or GCP or an on-prem server. As I've said before, the process is exceptionally simple. All you have to do is you have to install an agent. But this is something which is very basic, and I thought of just including it, that installing this agent requires an admin privilege on the client machine itself. Okay, now if I talk about the other side, which is Azure. Now, since in Azure, every role, every built-in role can be either applied to the subscription level or at the resource group level. I mean, wherever you want to apply. Just an example like contributor role, for example. Okay, but then there are different implications of all these roles which are available in Azure, and there is an attribute which fairly contributes the functionality of a role, and that is what we call scope. Okay, so if a role is being scoped at the subscription level, then it will inherit all the permissions to all the resource groups which exist in that particular subscription. Now, if I talk about Azure ARC, to be very precisely, there is a role termed as Azure Connected Machine Onboarding. Yes, that's the name of the role that you can assign to individuals who will be onboarding the machines. And then once this role is assigned, all those users or admins will be able to onboard the machine to the respective group that you're going to define. Okay. Now, if you want to check details about this particular role, all you have to do is just go to portal.azure.com, select your subscription where you will be enabling this particular service, and then click on access control and then click on roles. And in the search bar, just type Azure ARC and you will get a list of all the roles that exist. Now, as you can see, it is mentioned over here like Azure ARC Kubernetes admin. Now, if you guys recall, it's not only about servers. There are multiple services which Azure ARC has to offer. And for every service, there is a predefined role that exists. Now, the one that we have to focus upon is this particular one, which is Azure ARC Connected Machine Onboarding. This is the role which we need. Okay. Now, if you'll go to the next screen and if you will check details about this particular role, you'll come to know the built-in role has the scope defined at the subscription level itself. So if you will use this built-in role, what this will typically do, understand this, let's say currently you got Azure ARC deployed for a specific region and it's in POC itself. This deployment is in POC, or you're trying to just check the product functionality. But then there is a slightly more sophisticated or complicated approach that you want to do. I mean, you can have two different regions where two different individuals are responsible to get the machines onboarded. In this case, what will happen that this particular user, which for which you have defined this permission at the subscription level will get the access for both the resource group, and he can actually onboard a machine to both the resource groups. Okay, so in these kind of scenarios, let's say hypothetically you have a requirement wherein you have multiple individuals onboarding machines to different resource groups. Okay, what you can do is you can assign a contributor role at the resource group level for both the individuals. So in this case, user 1 will not be able to onboard machines to resource group 2, which is Azure ARC region 2 hypothetically. Similarly, this particular user will not be able to onboard machine to the first resource group. Now, apart from these two approach, wherein you can get a built-in role assigned to a user, or you can get a role assigned to a user at the contributor role, at the resource group level itself, there is one more role which exists, and that is Azure Connected Machine Resource Admin. Yes, that's the name of the role, wherein you give the privilege for somebody to either read, modify, or delete the VMs or delete the servers that you have onboarded, Azure ARC servers. Okay, now let's say you have all the right permissions and you want to onboard machines. All you have to do is go to portal.azure.com, search for Azure ARC, and as you can see, all the different set of options are getting listed over here. From here, select servers, because this is exactly what we are going to discuss. Then once you click on servers, then click on add. This default console will list down all the servers that have been onboarded. Now, once you will click on add, there will be 4 different options to get the servers onboarded. And the one that we are going to cover in this particular video is the first one, where it says add a single server, and then it is asking you to create or generate script. Now, the moment you will click on generate script, the first section that you will see is basically an overview or a sort of awareness pane, wherein it lets you know that these are the URLs which are required, local admin permission is required, and then make sure that you select the respective connectivity method. Now, from this particular console, just click on next. The first option that you will get on the next console will be selection of the resource group. That means that before you start the Azure ARC deployment process, make sure that you have created the resource group, if required a dedicated resource group, so that you can track everything what's happening. Okay, the next section that you see here is moreover related to regions, where all this particular service is available. So I will be mentioning a link in the description wherein I will let you know that these are the regions which are supported. It will obviously a Microsoft official documentation. You can go ahead and review that as well. The next section is connectivity method, wherein you are getting 3 different options: public endpoint, proxy server, and private endpoint. Now, let's say if in your environment, there is a concept of a URL whitelisting, or let's say you just whitelist some of the URLs so that the machines can communicate to those URLs, then you can select the first option. The second option is when you have a proxy server, then it means that while this process goes through, while you are trying to create a script that can help you onboard, it will ask you for the details regarding your proxy server, and then it'll get you a specific script that you can use. The last one is private endpoint. Make sure that you select this option when you have Azure Express Route, because then there is a private link scope that you have to create and get that mapped. Okay, so these are the 3 different set of options which are available. Now, the next section or the next part is something that will help you defining tags. And for all the obvious reasons, this is something that can help you to have a better administrative process in place. So for sure, you can use the one which are predefined, or if you want, you can create your custom tags as well. Now, the moment you will click on next on this particular screen, the next screen will list the script that you have to run on the endpoint itself. Now, before I go ahead and show you all this in action, let's break it down, this particular section, and see what exactly this script is doing for you. Okay, so the first section of the script itself says invoke-web request to this particular URI, and then the outcome of this particular request should be saved in the form of a script. Make sense? So the first section, which is this particular line which says invoke-web request to this particular URI. Now, if you guys remember when I was talking about the network requirement, I was very specifically saying that make sure these are the two URLs as well that you can get whitelisted. One was for Windows and the other one was for Linux. Okay. And this is the only reason, why I asked you to get those two URLs whitelisted. Now, if you want to see what exactly happens when this location is being reached by a client, then there is one more script that gets downloaded. So this is that particular script which will be shown or which will be accessed by your server when the server will try to invoke a web request to this particular URL. And this URL actually redirects the request to this one currently. That's the current behavior. Okay. Now, once this script is being saved into the temp location of your server, I mean the temporary folder, what exactly happens? The installation gets started. But the question is, how come the installation is getting started? Because the process of downloading the agent itself is defined in this particular script. Okay. So if I come back to my browser, let's say, and if I show you that script again, so this is where you will land. And if you will go to this particular section of download the package, this particular section, what you will see here, it is clearly defined that this is the request which has to reach to this particular URL and then save the file or then save the MSI package. Okay. So if you'll come back to your particular script now, the one which will get generated from the portal, once the agent is downloaded, the next step is to go ahead and get that particular agent installed. And that is done from this particular section. Okay. As you can see, this particular script is getting initiated. That is actually going to query a lot more details from the server itself. And then it will get that MSI package installed for you. The next section that you see here is the actual section which will go ahead and register your machine to a specific resource group altogether. So in my case, I have a resource group named as Azure ARC servers. Okay, this is my tenant ID, and I have selected the location of East US. This is my subscription ID, and then there is a value called correlation ID. This is something which is generated by the portal itself, so you need not to worry about this. But while you are using this script on a machine or on a server that you're trying to onboard, I will suggest you to add one more parameter over here, and that is hyphen verbose. Now, the reason behind telling you this, because it is actually going to list down each and every activity that this particular script is trying to do. Likewise, going ahead and checking for the file. Likewise, going ahead and checking for all the endpoints, whether the machine is able to contact or not. Okay. And then this is a kind of a message that will come on your browser, which will ask you to go ahead and sign in to a specific URL and then type the device code over there. That's again a process, a kind of a user verification which is happening, because when you will sign in with your username and password on that particular URL, it is actually going to verify the permissions that we have discussed. Okay. So the end-to-end process is go to this particular link, get the script downloaded, initiate the script, get the client installed, and then make sure that the client gets connected. So this is the purpose of end-to-end information that is shown to you on the portal. Now let me switch to my browser and show you all this in action. So this is my browser where I have signed into portal.azure.com, and in the search bar, I'm just going to type Azure ARC. And as you can see, now I'm inside the console wherein all the capabilities of Azure ARC is getting listed. Now in the first video or in the second video, I have shown you the difference in terms of the icons that are available, right? And I hope now you will be able to relate that this particular icon means Azure ARC service as a whole, but then there is a section which is completely abbreviated to servers part itself. And this is that particular icon. Okay. So now I'm just going to click on add, and I'm going to click on the first option, which is generate script. Now, as you can see, this particular section is listing down all the prerequisites which are required, and I'll click on next. Now, I have said this before as well, but I'm repeating this, that make sure the resource group on which you want the servers to be onboarded must be created before you start this deployment, because this particular section does not give you the option to create a new resource group. Okay, so I've already created a resource group, and that is Azure ARC -servers, and I've selected that. In region, I'm not going to change. My operating system is Windows. There are two options that you will get over here, Windows and Linux. So I'm going to keep the first one. And now there are actually no restrictions in my network, so I'll keep this option of public endpoint. But if you have a proxy server, you can select this option and specify the URLs of your proxy server. But if you have an express route service with you, then you can select this particular option and choose your private link scope, provided you have already created one. Okay, so I'll choose the first option, which is public endpoint, and I'll click on next. Now I'm not going to define any tags over here. I'll just keep the default settings, and then I'll click on next. Now, as you can see, this is the same script which I was discussing in a lot more detail in the deck itself. The first section is routing you to go to this particular URL, the one which I have listed in our network requirement section as well, that make sure you whitelist this, because then there is a redirect that will go to this particular URL. And as you can see, this is the entire script which goes ahead and check all the details related to a machine. I'm going to talk about this script end to end when we'll talk about details. But again, this is a section which helps you to download the MSI package on the machine. Okay. Now, if I'll come back to this particular section, this is the one which is actually initiating the request to go ahead and get the machine connected. Okay. So now what I'll do is I will copy this script end to end, and I'll come back to my server, which I will try to onboard. This is that particular server. The host name of this machine is, just give me a minute, it's slightly slow. Oops, I think I'm inside PowerShell. Okay, so let's come back to command prompt, host name. This is the host name of this particular machine. And if I come back to my portal, I will not see any of these machines getting listed. So if I go to portal.azure.com, there should be no such machine getting listed, which has a host name starting with WIN or WIN. That's the expected behavior. So servers -Azure ARC. And as you can see, there are only two different machines which are available over here. Okay. So now I'll come back to my machine. And here we have to run that script. So I'll create a notepad, which is already here. Okay. I'm going to paste that particular script, and I'm going to apply a word wrap. So just, you guys can see it clearly. I'm going to increase the size, and this is that particular script. Now, if you guys remember that I told you that it will be better if we can add one more parameter over here, and that is verbose, because this is something which is going to give you a lot more information in terms of what exactly happening on that particular script. I mean, when that script is getting initiated, what exactly the information which is getting accessed, which endpoints are getting accessed. So now I'm just going to save this script on a specific location from where we can just get it started. So let's name it as arc.ps1. That's all. I'm going to click on save. Now I'll come back to my PowerShell. Let me just initiate that. Now, once this has been changed to PowerShell, I'll go ahead and run that particular script, which is arc.ps1. And I'm going to click on enter. Or let me do something. Let me increase the size of the fonts here as well, so that it will be easier for you to relate and see what's exactly happening. Okay, so now I'm going to initiate that particular script, and I'm going to click on enter. Now the expected behavior is that it will ask me to go on a specific URL and then type the code once the installation is completed. Okay, so I'll go to appwiz.cpl, and I'll show you the agent name that will come here, which is Azure Connected Machine Agent, once this process is completed. Okay, so I'll pause the video for a couple of seconds, and I'll resume once the installation is completed. So as you can see, the installation has now been completed, and it took around 1.5 minutes on my machine to get this client installed or to get this agent installed. But let me show you what all information I'm getting if I'm using Verbose. Okay. So this is where the installation was completed and the activation got started, because as I've said before, that this particular section is the section which gets the client registered. Okay. So if I'll come back to my command prompt, and if I go to this particular URL, which is Microsoft.com/, okay, my bad, I canceled this installation. So let me show you something. Now, since the client already exists, all I have to do is I have to just activate that client. Okay. Now, if you will see that if I will not use Verbose, okay, command, then I'm not going to get all the information. Okay. You'll see that here it says that checking network connectivity to all the endpoints, and then it shows all the endpoint available. But here it will list down each and everything, because in my initial script, we have used -verbose. Now this time, without wasting time, I'll just copy this particular code. I'll come back to my browser and I'll go to https microsoft.com/device login. Now, since I'm already signed in with one of my account, it is not giving me the option to sign in, and I'll just type this code here and I'll click on next. That's all. And as you can see, it is showing me that this particular account is already signed in. So now what you need to make sure that this account that you are using here must have the right set of permission, because this account will be used to get the machine registered. Okay. Now let's come back to our VM and see what are we getting over there. Okay, so let's wait for a couple of seconds and it will show us that this particular server has already been registered. Or what we can do is we can come back to the portal. Okay, and then we'll see the respective set of information. But here, yeah, as you can see, it is showing me successfully onboarded the resource, and this is the particular VM ID. Okay, so now let me come back to my browser and I'll go back to server-Azure ARC, and let's wait for a couple of minutes. As you can see, this machine is getting listed over here and it is showing connected. Okay, now I can click on these machines, and if you guys remember, I can use the next set of capabilities which Azure has to offer. That means I can get this machine onboarded to Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and then I can manage the security aspects of this, or I can deploy extensions, or I can deploy policies. Okay. So this is the manual onboarding process. I mean, where there is a user interaction is required, wherein a user has to go to this particular URL and then type in this code to get the machine registered. And while this process is happening, the permission verification is also something, which is happening. So just a quick recap. This was the script that we have downloaded from the portal. I have added one more command, which is -verbose. And once this script got initiated, I was getting each and every detail about what is exactly happening under the hood, which endpoints are getting connected to, and then where exactly it is failing, what is the last message that the machine tried to convey to the particular service. Okay. Now, in the next video, we'll see the process of onboarding machines at scale. That means if I'll go here and if I'll click on add, this is the option that we are going to cover in next video. And after that, we'll see end-to-end details about different kind of processes, folders, event logs, everything that gets typically generated for this kind of deployment when a machine is trying to get registered to Azure ARC. Okay, so this was all about knowing how the onboarding process works manually. So let's talk about a quick summary of what all we have discussed. We have discussed about the process, different type of processes which are available to get the machine onboarded, what are the rules which are required, details about the script, and I've just shown you how to onboard a 2019 server to Azure ARC. Now, irrespective of which server version you are using, the process is exceptionally same. I mean, it's completely identical. There is no change that you have to do, because if you'll come back to the portal, let's say, and if you'll click on generate a script, it just gives you one option, Windows, which means that there is no difference in terms of the onboarding related to different platforms. Okay. So now in the next video, we are going to discuss about how to onboard machines at scale. So if you think that this channel is helping you to learn anything new, please feel free to subscribe and share this video with your technical community. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Bye-bye.